I want you to stop whatever you're doing for just a second. And imagine a scenario. Picture this. You are 72 years old.
Okay.
You've been retired for, say, a solid 12 years. Life has been going fairly well. You know, a bit of traveling, spending time with the family, finally getting off that corporate treadmill.
Sounds like the dream, right?
It does. But then, one random Tuesday morning, you log into your banking app and the balance staring back at you is just, it's zero.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the entire retirement corpus is gone. But thanks to, modern medicine, you still have 13 years left to live. You're going to make it to 85. So who pays the bills for the next decade?
It is a really sobering image, honestly, having to suddenly depend entirely on your kids or realizing a single medical emergency could just wipe out your remaining independence.
Right.
And looking at the data in front of us today for this deep dive, this isn't some dystopian fiction. This is the actual statistical trajectory for a massive portion of the population.
Because they're calculating their savings based on fundamentally flawed assumptions, right?
Exactly. Completely flawed.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are throwing out all those vague financial platitudes. No more articles telling you to, just save 20% and you'll be fine.
Because 20% isn't always enough.
Nowhere near enough for a lot of people. So today, we are unpacking the exact mathematically calculated percentage of your income you actually must save based on your current age if you want to survive comfortably until you're 85. We're finding your exact number today.
And look, we're looking at cold, hard mathematical realities here, which sounds intimidating, but when you understand the mechanics behind these equations now, you gain the leverage to prevent that zero balance crisis from happening decades down the line.
Yeah, it's not about fear-mongering. It's just reality.
Numbers strip away the emotion, which makes them incredibly effective tools for behavioral change.
So the source material we're working with today hinges on a concept called longevity risk, which, on the surface, that sounds like a complete oxymoron.
Right, longevity's a risk.
Yeah. I mean, living a longer, healthier life is supposed to be the ultimate human goal. Framing it as a financial curse feels, completely counterintuitive.
Biologically, it's a massive triumph. We're living longer. But financially, it becomes a severe liability if those extra decades are just, unfunded. And this shift has happened incredibly fast.
Like historically speaking.
Yeah. In 1947, the average life expectancy in India was just 32 years.
Wait, 32? That's wild.
Just 32. Today, it sits around 72. And factoring in the current acceleration in medical science, AI diagnostics, catching diseases earlier, breakthroughs in targeted cancer therapies, preventative medicine, someone who is 30 years old today has a very high probability of hitting 85 to 90 years old.
By the middle of the century, yeah. So if the standard retirement age remains 60 and you live to 90, you are staring down 30 years of post-retirement life.
3 full decades.
It's like packing a lunchbox for a 4-hour hike. But halfway up the mountain, you realize the trail is actually 12 hours long. You were going to starve if you didn't pack provisions for the actual distance.
That's a perfect analogy. You are attempting to fund 3 decades of existence with zero incoming salary, none. And in your 70s and 80s, health insurance premiums don't just inch up. They compound aggressively.
Right. The older you get, the riskier you are to insure.
Exactly. And running parallel to that is the silent wealth killer, which is inflation. Historically, we have to model for a 6% annual inflation rate.
Which just completely destroys your purchasing power. If your, say, weekly groceries cost 500 rupees today, a persistent 6% inflation rate means those exact same items will cost around 87,000 rupees 30 years from now.
Let that sink in. 87,000 rupees.
Look, the human brain simply isn't equipped to process long-term exponential functions like that.
No, we just can't visualize it.
When a threat is 30 years away, we experience what's called hyperbolic discounting. We prioritize the immediate stuff, the car EMI, the rent, the dinner out, because the pain of inflation and our own expanding lifespan, it's just invisible today. So if we know the hike is 30 years long, the next logical step is calculating the exact amount of provisions to pack. The sources rely heavily on what they call the 4% safe withdrawal rule, framing it as the gold standard of retirement planning.
Yeah, the 4% rule acts as a mathematical anchor. The mechanism works like this. Upon retirement, you withdraw exactly 4% of your total accumulated corpus in the first year.
Okay, and then what about the next year?
In every subsequent year, you adjust that withdrawal amount strictly to match the inflation rate. If your portfolio is balanced correctly, Historical market data suggests that corpus should survive 25 to 30 years without depleting to zero.
Okay, so working the math backward from that rule. If my withdrawal in year one needs to represent exactly 4% of my total, then the total corpus I must accumulate is basically 25 times my first year's annual retirement expenses.
Yes. The required corpus is simply 25 multiplied by your first year's expense. That's the baseline.
But building a model to actually hit that target before you turn 60, that requires plugging in some pretty rigid assumptions about, market behavior and your personal career trajectory.
You have to make some educated guesses. The parameters are laid out clearly in the research. The model assumes retirement at age 60 and a steady 6% annual inflation rate.
Right.
And during your working years, it projects your investments will grow at a 10.5% CAGR.
Which is the compound annual growth rate.
Exactly. They derive that 10.5% from a standard portfolio mix of 70% equity index funds and 30% debt.
Which seems fairly standard.
It is a balanced expectation for a long-term investment horizon. The 70% equity captures market growth, while the 30% debt dampens the volatility when the market inevitably dips.
Okay, but the models also require a baseline assumption about your lifestyle, right? That your post-retirement life will cost exactly what you currently spend today, adjusted for inflation.
Right, which means your current income minus whatever you are saving today.
And it also assumes your real income stays flat. Like, the model projects your salary only growing by 6% a year, essentially just neutralizing inflation, but nothing more. And look, I have to push back on that.
Go for it.
If I'm aggressive in my career, I'm upskilling, I'm changing companies, and my salary grows at, say, 10 or 12% a year, I am actively beating that 6% inflation rate. Doesn't that shatter the model in my favor?
Give me a bit of a cheat code.
Well, outpacing inflation with salary growth definitely provides a massive advantage, assuming you actually invest the difference rather than, inflating your lifestyle.
Ah, the classic lifestyle creep.
Exactly. But anchoring a 30-year financial plan to the assumption of constant, never-ending promotions is honestly reckless.
Because you're essentially shorting corporate volatility.
You are. You're betting against recessions, industry disruptions, and even your own future health. Building the mathematical model on a flat real income creates the safest possible baseline.
So you don't get a false sense of security. Exactly. It prevents you from chronically undersaving in your 30s, under this illusion that you're somehow guaranteed to become a highly paid executive in your 40s.
That makes sense. We are planning for the baseline reality, not the optimal scenario. So, with those parameters set, the 4% rule, the 10.5% growth, the 6% inflation, the source material generates this table, and it details the precise percentage of your income you must save, dictated entirely by the age you start.
And fair warning, the math gets very unforgiving here.
Yeah, it really does. Starting at age 25, meaning you have 35 working years ahead of you, the required savings rate is 26% of your income. So on a 50,000 rupee monthly take-home salary, you invest 13,000 every month, and you fund your current lifestyle on the remaining 37,000.
Which is doable. Hitting 26% early in your career is highly effective because you're capturing 35 years of compounding.
But look at the penalty for a minor delay. Say you just wait a bit.
Yeah.
If you start at age 30, giving you 30 working years left, the required rate jumps to 35.6%.
It's a huge jump.
On that same 50,000 salary, the investment demand is now nearly 18,000 a month. Waiting just 5 years forces you to find an extra 5,000 rupees every single month for the rest of your career.
You are experiencing what they call the procrastination penalty.
I love that term, but I hate what it means.
Right. Because you aren't merely missing 5 years of principal contributions, You are forfeiting the 5 most powerful years of exponential growth at the very end of the curve.
Because compound interest is backloaded.
Exactly. There is a reason the source nods to Albert Einstein supposedly calling compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. The procrastination penalty demonstrates the violent downside of that wonder. A 5-year delay translates to a loss of crores of rupees at maturity.
And moving further down the table, the acceleration is just brutal. Starting at age 35 pushes the requirement to 38.5%. At age 40, you are looking at 46.7%.
Almost half your income.
At 45, it climbs to 56.8%.
Notice how quickly the required savings just completely eclipse your actual living expenses.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the age 50 requirement right now, and it sits at 68.7%. Wait, nearly 70% at age 50.
Yes.
If someone is taking home a lakh a month, This model dictates they must invest nearly 69,000 rupees, leaving them just 31,000 to manage a household, pay EMIs, and feed their kids. That is mathematically impossible for most people.
Oh, for the vast majority of people, it is absolutely impossible. But the analysts who built these models, they aren't suggesting a 50-year-old simply start living on 30% of their income overnight.
Then what's the point of the number?
The table serves as a diagnostic tool. It illustrates the exact threshold where the math fundamentally breaks your lifestyle. It forces a confrontation with the true consequences of financial delay.
Wow. Okay, it is a necessary confrontation.
Yeah.
However, the source material introduces a bombshell caveat that completely reframes these targets we just talked about.
Yes, this is the part that catches everyone off guard.
The percentages we just reviewed, the 35.6% for a 30-year-old, the 46.7% for a 40-year-old, those only cover baseline retirement expenses.
Yeah.
Utility bills, the groceries, the essential survival costs from age 60 to 85.
Right. The formula strictly calculates the replacement of your current monthly living expenses upon retirement. Nothing else.
Which means it explicitly excludes buying a house. It excludes funding your children's education.
Yep.
It excludes weddings, international vacations, and creating a robust medical emergency buffer. So saving that 35% is essentially just buying the entry ticket to get into the theme park of old age, but you still have to pay separately for every single ride inside.
That is exactly it. You get in the gate, but the house, the kids' college, the medical emergencies, those are all extra tickets. When you integrate those major predictable life goals into the timeline, the required savings rate for a 30-year-old can easily push past 50% or even 55%.
A 55% required savings rate sits in stark contrast to the national reality. The average net financial savings rate in India hovers around, what, 8.7%?
Yeah, roughly 8.7. The disconnect is just staggering.
People think they're doing well, securing their future, while saving a tiny fraction of what the map actually demands.
Because the illusion of wealth creation masks the deficit. People look at the EMI they pay on their primary residence or, the premiums on traditional life insurance policies, and they categorize that as robust saving.
But it's not.
Not for this purpose. Primary real estate is highly illiquid. I mean, you cannot eat the bricks of your house in retirement.
Right.
And low-yield insurance products rarely outpace inflation. Add in aggressive lifestyle creep, and all that surplus capital just evaporates.
This perfectly explains the phenomenon of the broke high-income earner. Someone pulling in, say, 40 lakhs a year, but burning through 35 lakhs just to sustain this premium lifestyle.
Exactly. They haven't secured the baseline entry ticket, they're just financing the immediate rides. The math doesn't care about the absolute size of your salary, it only cares about the ratio of your savings to your consumption.
Okay, the landscape we've mapped out so far is really heavy. The mathematical targets are steep, the hidden costs are substantial, and the national average is obviously failing. To move from, diagnosis to strategy, the research provides a case study that pulls these abstract percentages into an actionable framework.
Let's talk about Rakesh. The case study of Rakesh isolates the mechanics of actually closing this deficit.
Right, so Rakesh is a 30-year-old IT professional. His net monthly take-home is 75,000 rupees. His living expenses, rent, food, utilities, leisure total, 45,000. And he currently channels 10,000 a month into an SIP, a systematic investment plan, in mutual funds. On paper, he appears super financially responsible.
He's definitely doing better than most, but let's run his current behavior against the baseline model. Investing 10,000 on a 75,000 net income gives him a savings rate of exactly 13.3%.
But the age table dictates a 30-year-old requires a 35.6% savings rate just to fund the baseline retirement. 35.6% of 75,000 is roughly 26,700 rupees.
And he's only investing 10,000.
So he is carrying a silent monthly deficit of 16,700 rupees.
Right.
If he maintains this current trajectory, he hits that 72-year-old zero balance scenario we talked about at the start.
Yes, he does.
So how does he mitigate a 16,700 rupee gap without drastically reducing his quality of life today?
The source outlines several practical mitigation strategies, or levers, you can pull. The first lever requires auditing for hidden assets, specifically mandatory savings mechanisms like the Employee Provident Fund or EPF.
Right, because in India, a standard structure writes 12% of the basic salary directly into EPF, often matched by the employer.
Exactly. Those funds are fully locked away for retirement, but they rarely factor into our daily cash flow calculations. We just don't see them.
So if Rakesh's basic salary component is 40,000, he already has 4,800 quietly flowing into his retirement bucket every single month. By simply acknowledging that existing structure, his 16,700 gap immediately shrinks.
Auditing your existing assets provides instant mathematical relief. It's the easiest win. Now, the second lever manipulates the timeline itself. Pushing the retirement age back alters the equation on both ends.
How much of a difference does a few years make?
A lot. If a 40-year-old shifts their target retirement age from 60 to 65, their required savings burden drops from a punishing 46.7% down to 38.5%.
Because you are simultaneously allowing your accumulated corpus 5 additional years to compound undisturbed, while also eliminating 5 years of zero salary withdrawals from the back end.
Exactly. The mathematical impact of that 5-year shift is profound. It can save a failing plan.
The third strategy focuses on aggressive income generation. So, upskilling, launching side hustles, freelancing, with the strict caveat that 100% of that new income stream is invested to prevent lifestyle creep.
Which is key.
But I was here, just start a side hustle. And for someone working 50 hours a week, with a commute, maybe kids, that sounds exhausting. Is there a way to lessen the blow without necessarily taking on a second job?
Burnout is a highly probable outcome if you try to outwork the math purely through sheer volume. This is exactly why the source material ultimately leans on a systemic 5-step action plan. It utilizes behavioral economics rather than relying on endless hustle culture.
Walk us through the 5 steps.
Sure. Step 1 requires matching your current age to the required percentage on the table we discussed. Step 2 translates that percentage into a strict rupee amount based on your take-home pay.
Okay, simple enough.
Step 3 is the audit we just did with Rakesh, deducting your existing EPF, PPF, or active investments to isolate your true, actual monthly gap, finding the precise missing variable.
Right, finding out exactly how short you are. Step 4 dictates initiating a new investment vehicle today. Perhaps a broad market index fund, like a Nifty 500 specifically sized to cover that remaining gap.
But here is the magic. The entire architecture of this plan relies entirely on Step 5, committing to step up that new SIP by 10% every single year.
This is the mechanism that captures your natural career progression. As your salary increases through standard annual raises, you automatically route a 10% increase into your investments.
Right. Consider the behavioral mechanics at play here. If you receive a standard raise and you automatically increase your investment contribution by 10%, you are still taking home more net pay than you did the previous year.
So it doesn't register psychologically as a sacrifice.
Exactly. You don't feel the pinch. You are systematically intercepting the new capital before lifestyle creep can absorb it into your daily spending.
You are engineering a system where compounding does the heavy lifting over a 30-year horizon, neutralizing the effects of inflation without requiring an 80-hour work week.
You leverage time and automation to turn what looks like an insurmountable percentage into a gradual, completely manageable trajectory.
We began this analysis confronting a stark reality, the very real threat of outliving your capital over a 30-year retirement. We mapped the mathematical mechanics of the 4% rule, exposed the brutal procrastination penalty, and unpacked the hidden costs that standard models often obscure.
But we also deconstructed the solutions.
Yes, identifying your precise gap and implementing an automated annual step-up fundamentally shifts the balance of power back to you.
Because awareness without implementation is useless. The numbers dictate the necessary strategy, but the real variable is whether you choose to actually execute it.
Which brings the focus directly back to you, the listener. Have you identified where your current age sits on that table? Do you know if your current trajectory aligns with the 35% or the 46% requirement?
The compounding clock is running, regardless of whether you choose to look at the math or not.
The most critical action you can take today is running your own numbers and isolating your personal gap. And I want to leave you with a different lens through which to view your daily financial decisions.
Let's hear it.
Building a sustainable corpus